Hello, everyone. Welcome to our vegetable garden basics class today. What's happening now in your vegetable garden? My name is David Rodriguez. I'm the horticulturalist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, which is the educational arm of our land-grant university, Texas A&M University. On this slide, there's my email address, so please do write it down. Anytime you need help with gardening or landscape, don't hesitate to send me an email. If you need something identified, an insect, a plant, or other, send some good quality images to this email address. But please send them as attachments and not part of your email. So what's happening now in your vegetable garden? So you don't see me on the screen. So if some of y'all haven't seen me before, that's a picture of me at our children's vegetable garden program at the beautiful San Antonio Botanical Garden. And we're very fortunate here in Central and South Texas to be able to garden 12 months out of the year, as long as you kind of plan things out and plant the appropriate crops at the right time. So we have two major planting seasons. We have the spring planting season, and then we have a fall planting season. The spring planting season starts as early as January with cool weather crops, and then it transitions from March, April, early May into warm and then warm weather crops that we'll be discussing as well. And then it just reverts back to starting all over again with August with warm weather crops planted, and then starting as early as mid-September and heaviest in the month of October planting cool weather crops. So we can grow quite a bit of things here. Thus our old nickname, the Winter Garden of the United States. So, how is your garden looking now? A lot of y'all have a lot of plants already going, and we'll talk about some how they should be looking at this time and give you some suggestions of what else you can plant from mid-April through early May. Molly Keck, our entomologist, will be covering the part two of this series on insects, so we're not going to really cover that, but we'll cover real heavy disease issues and then do a quick review of other on the best practices out there in your vegetable garden. So this is common. When you see yellow or brown leaves on your plants, the first thing that people react is they tend to start watering more and often, or fertilize. And often that's the worst thing you can do for a plant that's already turning yellow or brown is often water it more or just fertilize it. You should never put a plant in more stress by doing that. So if you see yellow and brown leaves, particularly if you kind of look at the weather we've been having in the vegetable garden in the last 3 or 4 weeks, high humidity, lack of sunny days this spring, overwatering caused by us, or some of us have been fortunate to get good amounts, overly good amounts of rainfall. But when you water any plant, you want to minimize getting the foliage wet, particularly the soil-borne fungi that splashes on the leaves of the plants tend to start these disease problems. Drainage, when we need rain, but we would like to have an inch of rain every Tuesdays, but unfortunately that doesn't happen. Finding the right extension varieties is the key. We do the legwork in extension horticulture locally as well as statewide and work with the grower and the independent nurseries in and around the area to make sure that they have the right varieties of transplants and the best quality seed for your success as a home gardener, a school garden, a community garden, and even small acre producers on the 7 satellite counties. Thinking and having a plan at the beginning is very crucial. How many plants do I need? Are they properly spaced? When they grow, do they have ample air circulation and adequate sunlight? Because all those bring about disease problems. And so we really need to space these plants. Can I get in there to harvest? Can I walk through there? Can I get a wheelbarrow through my road? So all those are considerations that often, if we don't follow these, we tend to get these disease issues, which can be burdensome on our vegetable gardens. So how do we get better at this? So we try our best, culturally speaking, to improve the growing techniques that we have out there in our vegetable garden. Try to catch it early, particularly when the yellow leaves start appearing. Simply pinch them off. Often we wait too long that when a plant starts really turning yellow in disease, not knowing how to properly identify it as an insect, a disease, or other. So when a disease comes in, often, and we don't stop it early, then it's usually too late because the yellow and brown, even if you when you spray it with a fungicide such as Daconil, which contains the active ingredient called chlorothalonol, it's too late. So try to catch it early. A prophylactic approach is sometimes needed, particularly after the events that we talked about. Real rainy days for a couple of days, and then when the sunlight comes out early in the morning, after the morning dew has dried, then you would want to spray such a fungicide as Daconil. As good stewards to the environment, we always read and follow label instructions, as these are good products, but as consumers and good stewards of the environment, we do have to use these products correctly. So let's first review some basic and practical horticulture growing principles in regarding your vegetable production. These next slides that we're going to show you, this is your 90%. If you can really cover these and plant the right things at the right time and follow these guidelines, 90% of the test has been passed. But unfortunately, people often don't follow them to a T, and we tend to get into disease and other issues down the line. Sun is so very crucial for vegetables. You need 8 to 10 hours of all day sunbathing full sun with ample air circulation in and around your extension varieties that are properly spaced out in your garden. Now, all the warm weather vegetable crops have flowers, and they have basically fruit, berry type plants. Anything with seeds in it is typically a warm weather crop. That includes tomatoes, peppers, squash, zucchini, green beans, cucumbers, etc. Now, your veggies that have roots like carrots and radishes, beets, turnips, etc., as well as your leafy greens like lettuce, spinach, celery, all those are considered cool weather crops. So during the fall and winter time, which we can grow a lot of those cool weather crops, you can probably get away with 4 to 6 hours of intense sunlight. But ideally, all vegetables really will perform to its peak of performance with quantity and quality of yields if they receive at least 8 to 10 hours of intense sunlight. So these are kind of images that we get from our clientele out here. We have a native tree, our Texas state tree, our pecan tree, with cucumbers trying to grow up the trunk of the tree, and then some squash plants on the bottom. So we not only have the issue of lack of sunlight, but also that massive root system from that pecan tree competing against these very small vegetables. So failure is there. Of course, this slide looks very silly, but unfortunately, having too much shade tends to be the same problem in all cases. This is one of the biggest downfalls that we see not only in home gardens, but community gardens and even school gardens, is weed management. If you're not familiar with Bermuda grass as a weed, you will soon with this warm weather that we've been having. So weeds are thieves. When we start out on a clean slate. When you plant seeds, when you put your transplants out, you want to have very fallow, clean land with no weed competition. Once weeds get in there, it's almost impossible to control. If you look at this community garden, folks, they spent 3 days, 15 to 20 people, many hours out here with the organic practice of hand pulling these weeds, putting massive layers of cardboard on it, and they did an excellent job. Of course, they spent a lot of time and energy, but in 3 to 4 weeks, it looked like the back how it was in no time at all. So, if you need to use herbicides and use them correctly, don't rule that out of your arsenal. Again, always read and follow label instructions. As Dr. Sam Cotner, a great mentor of mine, always used to say, the best friend in your garden is your shadow. That means you're out there often, you're being inquisitive. You're looking at things happening out there. But most important, your second best friend in your vegetable garden is a sharp grubbing hoe. So when you're walking up and down these beds, you're basically chopping and staying up on any weed. Weeds are thieves, and if you do not control these, either around your shade tree, your fruit trees, but most important, your vegetable garden, you'll bring in disease, more disease issues. You bring insects and much, much more problems when they steal your water from your plants, as well as essential nutrition to grow your plants. Efficiency. We talked about last week about turf grass. Maybe you have an area that's in full sun that you'll take out that turf grass, take advantage of the San Antonio water systems conservation rebates that they have on their programs, and maybe set out a vegetable, herb, or cut flower garden. But the most efficient way to water, particularly vegetable gardens, is drip irrigation. Drip irrigation is putting a precise amount of water right at the base, at the root of that plant, so it can most efficiently utilize it and uptake it. So it is saving water if used correctly. So if you're not familiar with drip irrigation, you can use it on your patio plants or in and around your landscape shrubs, perennials, other. But for sure, on your raised beds and your vegetable garden is a must, as we all need to be stewards of the water that we have out there. A vegetable garden, if irrigated correctly, doesn't really waste water. It's people not using the system correctly. And saying that, with all the technology that we're using nowadays, there's technology of using timers, but a timer doesn't work when there's no batteries in it. So you have to be out there and be out there often. You start a crop, you finish a crop. Remember, growing vegetables are short-term crops that you're running a race. So you have to stay up on all the management techniques in order to finish this race. But using a drip irrigation system, you still need to go out there, make sure you don't have any leaks. Make sure if you do use technology such as a timer, that's working correctly and you're not over irrigating. Because often people over irrigate than under irrigate. So we can be all better stewards of how we water our vegetable gardens. When your plants are growing and doing real well, we usually say about the month of May. Particularly if you do early plantings from January to early April, let the soil be bare, but still stay up on your weed management. Do not mulch till about early to mid-May, particularly these warm weather crops that you're planting early. So the soil temperature can take advantage of the nice early sunny days to help accelerate the growth of seeds that are germinating, as well as the transplants that are set out. So around the early May, do the 2-2-2 technique, a 2-inch layer of double shredded hardwood mulch, maybe a living mulch with compost in it, 2 inches thick, a minimum of 2 inches away from the crown of the plants. That will really help hold moisture in. It'll help keep the weeds down as well. And when it starts getting real warm and hot going into May or early June, you'll be so surprised that if it feels 90 degrees plus out there, putting a soil thermometer under the mulch layer, it can be at 80 degrees or lower. Plus, using a good mulch such as double shredded hardwood mulch with compost is going to help build the soil over time when that mulch becomes compost and breaks down. Also, when we use mulch, a lot of these fungal issues are soil borne. So it'll minimize the droplets from rainfall from hitting the soil and bouncing back up on the leaf surface of the plant, which a lot of these soil-borne fungus spread disease that way. This is the other big downfall of all gardening in general: ample nutrition and constant amending with organic material. The best soils in the world have about a 5% organic material content to it. Most of this area 100 plus years ago were grassy range areas before cattle and urbanization started and farming. So we probably had about a 3% organic material back then. Now most of these residential situations have less than half of 1%. So we lack organic material in the soil, and we lack true well nutrition in the soil. So we have to supplement. So every major planting season of spring and fall, it's best to get 2 inches of a very high quality finished compost that's been properly aged and decomposed. If you use barnyard manures, make sure you age it for at least a year, that you screen it, and it's not hot, and you know where your source material comes from, so we're not bringing any potential herbicides into your garden. So 2 inches of high-grade finished compost worked into your pre-plant granulated fertilizer. So use 3 to 5 pounds of a slow-release fertilizer, such as a 1959 analysis. The same fertilizer you use this week in your lawn, use about 3 to 5 pounds of that per 100 square feet of your vegetable garden with 2 inches of the finished compost worked into the soil at planting, a minimum of 6 inches deep. Down the line, when you build up the organic material of the soil, you can probably cut this back. But remember, you're running a race. And when you're running the race, you're accelerating the growth of these plants. And basically, you're doing two things. You need the sun, you need the right variety planted at the right time of the year, but you're growing leaves. And with ample nutrition, you're growing abundance of leaves, i.e., an abundance of broccoli, cabbage, tomatoes, and other vegetables will come with due time. So we're finishing up our cool weather crops. Most of your cool weather crops for the springtime were typically planted about January to no later than the first week or so of March. So we see a nice, beautiful picture of Green Magic broccoli, a 2007 Texas Superstar, a selection here from the Belgians in our winter garden. These are finishing up. So we plant our best broccoli September for Thanksgiving dinner, third leaf stage transplants, and our best planting in about early to mid-October to come in for Christmas dinner. The Green Magic broccoli usually we plant from January, February, no later than early March, and that's our spring broccoli, which is not as big as the September broccoli, but a good quality broccoli. We want to keep these leaves clean as any other type of a green crop. We want to minimize, and Molly Keck, our entomologist, will talk about certain insects, but these are finishing up now. Just like head cabbage, we picked these head cabbage back in the fall and winter time. HEB usually brings in 1.5 pound head cabbage into the produce section, but in the fall we can go 3 pound ones. In the spring, as these head cabbages are finishing out at this time, you'll be lucky to get no more than about 2 pound cabbage, which is still very significant. So we've done finished most of these cool weather crops, the green leaf type crops. Molly will cover the insects, the cleanup crew that usually take them out with tomorrow's presentation. So our main focus now is warm weather crops. Remember, a warm weather crop is like a tomato. Anything that's a fruit, anything that's a berry, basically has seeds in it. Tomatoes, pepper, eggplant, squash, zucchini, beans, cucumber, etc. So those are warm weather crops. But it's more than just tomatoes. We always tend to plant tomatoes, which is still America's #1 vegetable that everyone likes to plant. So let's talk a little bit about that. So back during February at the rodeo, our Bexar County Master Gardeners with HEB oversee a tent called Little Buckaroos on the Farm. And it's over 150,000 visitors go through that tent during the rodeo time. So we release a rodeo tomato every year. So a lot of people that want the bragging rights, first tomatoes on the block, start planting their spring tomatoes, typically late February, but most heavily during the month of March, no later than the first week of April. So basically, most all your tomato plants should be growing and looking at real nice. So if your plants aren't prime right now, you might consider this next year for early planting. A tomato cage should be 4 to 5 feet tall, with a 16 to 20 inch diameter, with little shepherd hooks in the bottom rim of the cage directly attached not to the rim, but to the main upright support structure of the cage, as not to bend the cage. And then we wrap them. This cloth is called insulate. Some people refer to it as winter protection blanket, grow web, and a few other names. So what this does, it keeps those little plants nice and warm, gives them another 4 to 5 degrees temperature protection. But most important is the wind. Remember the wind we had about a week or two ago? How bad it was on a lot of these plants that we had out there? This will minimize that. And you can pin it down on one side, typically the south side of the tomato cage, away from the cold of the winds, so it doesn't open it up. And we keep these on till about this week if you planted early plantings. So all these early spring plantings of tomatoes should be 3/4 up these tomato cages that are at least 5 feet tall with a 16 to 20 inch diameter on them. So they should already be flowering, and many of them have set fruit by now. They should be nice and healthy. So if you have not taken your cloth off and you waited till after last week with all those heavy winds that we have, then I would take them out. The other good thing about this blanket, the insulate, not only gives it enough sunlight for the plant to grow, keeps it a little bit warm during those cold events, and the wind, of course, the biggest thing. But using this on tomatoes and new plantings, early plantings of other crops works wonderful when you want to prevent insects. So this works real well as an insect barrier as well. So when you unwrap your plants this week, the folks that use this, I'm sure a lot of y'all aren't using this technique, but will next year. We'll find out that your plants are going to be much cleaner, free of insects. Now I want you to kind of look at this tomato also in front of us. This also refers back to our disease slide. This is an old technique. When we plant tomato plants, and most of the ones we plant or recommend with the Extension Service is bush-like determinants. They grow, they flower, they set fruit because by mid-June and 4th of July, it gets too hot, particularly night and daytime temperatures. But look at the bottom base of this plant. You have very little to no foliage touching the ground. So that's called a pinching. So we want to keep these young plants when we first set them out, very little to no at all foliage touching the ground because that will minimize the soil-borne diseases from getting up on the plants of the plant. And then when do we mulch? Mulch about here pretty soon, going into May. So another key of vegetable gardening is plant extension recommended varieties at the right time. With Dr. Jerry Parsons, Dr. Larry Stein, Dr. Sam Cotner, and a lot of great horticulturalists that were supporting the winter garden back in the 50s and 60s. We've done a lot of trials of working with farmers, getting that information, coming up with the rodeo tomato, a few Texas superstar vegetables, and giving you the best home garden, the best. Working with a grower, the grower supplies the retail independent nurseries with the right plants at the right time. So we do the legwork. That's what the Extension Service is. If you go to our Bexar County Extension Service website under horticulture, we have our list of all our recommended plants for this in and around this area, as well as the Aggie Horticulture website that will show you those links at the conclusion of this presentation. So a must winner for all tomatoes is Celebrity. Celebrity is a medium-sized tomato, about 8 ounces plus. Has a wonderful, beautiful sugar to acid ratio to it. In 1982, Dr. Jerry Parsons was doing a research on this with other varieties as a numbered variety from a specific plant breeder. And now, folks, Celebrity is the #1 planted tomato in the U.S., an all-American selection. So when we do our tomato trials, the oldest in the state here in our backyard in Bexar County and across the state, with 30 varieties or so every planting season, you always have to have controls. The Celebrity always is the control because most of every year it's always in the top 3 of the performers. So Celebrity is a winner. So is Tycoon, which is also a Texas superstar plant. So Celebrity and the next one, Valley Cat, and the tomatoes we select at bush type determinant selections have a lot of resistance to disease as well. Valley Cat is one we've been looking at the last few years. A very good tomato, a little bit larger than Celebrity, almost considered a beef slicing type because some of the fruit can potentially get a pound or so. Both Celebrity and Valley Cat, another good thing is they have resistance to viruses. There's about 2 or 3 major viruses that affect tomatoes and other vegetables in and around this area, which insects are typically the vector on that, particularly tomato yellow leaf curly virus. But Celebrity and Valley Cat also has resistance to root knot nematodes. So the nodules of the roots when the plant is growing and developing is engulfed by female root knot nematodes, and it basically clogs up the plumbing of the plant. So if the plant is stunted, not growing well, not green, not getting enough water, then your soil or where you get your uh, transplants from is a possibility sometimes, sourcing good quality material. So those two, Celebrity and Valley Cat, has an extra feature as a tomato plant having a resistance to that root knot nematode. So, well, you said, David, most of all the tomatoes are planted right now. So I got kids. We need something them for to do. So having cherry tomatoes is a must. So now through early May, if you can find cherry-like tomatoes, let's plant some now. Small fruited tomatoes should do very well if you maintain them and take care of them. Mulch them, keep them well watered, and everything else that we talked about. Look for this one. This is a Texas Superstar tomato, or any good small fruited Juliet, large red cherry, just to name a few others, or this cherry grape-like teardrop type tomato called Ruby Crush is another one. So these would be fine to set out transplants of these smaller fruited tomatoes at this time. Bush beans. Most of the bush beans are up and growing. Some people are already starting to pick some. But if you want to do some bush beans right now, a second crop, a second planting at this time, you should have pretty good success. So designate an area, plant a good 3 rows or so, minimum of 10 feet long each row, so you can have an abundance of harvest. Pole beans, you need a support structure for pole beans to grow up. The issue with pole beans is they're a little bit late to plant pole beans at this time, and you don't usually get a big bang for your buck for compared to bush beans. One thing I want to recommend on bush beans, squash, zucchini, cucumber, okra, a lot of these types of vegetables that have seed in them, you want to harvest these things when they're very young and immature. That's when they're going to be the most tastiest, the most nutritious. Plus, they hide. So you need to go in and around your plants 2 or 3 times because they're hiding. Remember, the mother plant is pushing out the next generation. So she's putting all her energy in the first wave of production with the biggest, um, uh, hardiest genetics on the seeds that she's trying to grow. So if you don't get these when they're young and tender of these crops that we mentioned already, what happens is they're going to be much, much prone to insects, which Molly will talk about tomorrow, as well as other disease issues. So get them when they're young. Don't let them hide, and pick them all. Now, another thing I want to go back to one slide is on these on the tomatoes. One thing about tomatoes. So we get calls like this every year. We got a lot of challenges with city creatures, critters. We have mockingbirds, we have squirrels, and other. So a lot of us want to have vine ripened tomatoes, which is great, but you got to keep those critters away from it. Physiologically speaking, once a tomato fruit is completely white with no blushes of green or shadows of green in it, and they start showing the first signs of pink in the fruit, physiologically speaking, that fruit will not size up anymore. So if you have issues with these creatures, critters, and two-legged neighbors getting to these tomatoes because you're trying to vine ripen them, do harvest them at that stage of ripeness because they will maturate and complete the maturation process inside the house. And keep the caps on, the little calyxes, the stem portion on the top, wipe them down, and then let them finish the process inside the house because that will really, really save you a lot of heartaches when those other squirrels and things get to them before you do. So here's a couple kids here having a good time. You know, that's a great thing for kids is to grow their own bush beans. So put your second wave out at this time. It's a fun crop and you can get them energized out there. Small fruited tomatoes, bush beans at this time are excellent for the kiddos to go ahead and start planting here this week as well. Squash and zucchini. Oh, my favorite. But again, you know, you got to get these when they're young and small. Don't let these zucchini get as big as baseball bats because that's when the disease and insects and spider mites will come after them right away. So young and tender is the key here. Harvest and harvest planting. So a lot of us have been harvesting a lot of zucchini, squash, and other types, scallopini and other squash at this time. Put out another way, direct seed them. If you find transplants of these, bigger does not necessarily mean better. Look for green, healthy plants, but on the second or third leaf stage, anything beyond that is just going to be shock. And that goes the same for any other cucurbit like plants, including cucumbers and melons. Cucumbers are fun. That's another thing with the kids. Get them involved with planting bush beans, small fruited tomatoes, and get another planting of cucumbers. This one here is called Sweet Slice. So you can maybe find a few small transplants at the third leaf stage or direct seeding them at this time. You'll have cucumbers within 45 days or less, but it's best to have some kind of support structure, maybe a tomato cage, a chain link fence, something to grow upright, a trellis or something like that. Folks, you don't have to do a big job growing a ton of these plants. You know, one cherry tomato, 3 rows, 10 feet long of bush beans, a couple cucumbers, because a cucumber that's grown very rapidly and healthy and correctly can produce 8 to 12 high quality marketable cucumbers. So get the kids involved with this as well. Jalapeno. Well, you know, these are kind of hot weather. All your hot peppers, jalapenos, serranos, and even people that go as crazy as planting ghost pepper and scorpion, Trinidad, and all these other crazy ones out there. Remember, a pepper should complement the meal, not put you in the hospital. So take caution with that, particularly if you have kids with the hotter ones. We live in San Antonio, so we like to make salsas and things like that. So jalapenos, serranos, even chili piquins are pretty good. But a lot of those are growing. Some people are starting to harvest, but you can get another planting out this time. A lot of the peppers will carry over when most of the other crops that we talked about usually succumb to the heat of summer in 4th of July or so. But peppers, you can carry them over as long as you watch the growth of the plant, watering, keeping it free of insects, disease, and mice through the heat of July and August. A lot of these peppers will produce again in the fall time. So go ahead and plant some of those now if you're ready for your second or major wave of peppers as well. Eggplant. This is a big football type. It's all referred to as Black Beauty. The other one is called Florida Market, which are two big type of eggplants. Again, the same way as peppers. Plant your second wave if you don't have eggplant. Plant it out there as well. A lot of people don't like to grow eggplant because they don't know how to use them correctly. The one thing about eggplant is the sheen, to go from a real brilliant sheen to a light sheen, uniformity of size of the fruit, and no green at the both tips of the fruit, and that should be ready to be brought in. You might have to clip them, not pull them off the plant. Certain vegetables you have to clip because you don't want to break the stem of the plant. But the other thing when you're ready to bring in the eggplant is when you're ready to prepare it, sweat it with sea salt after you cut it. Get the beads moisture out, which often holds the bitterness. And try that, and maybe you'll enjoy eggplants, eggplant parmesan, and things like that. Or if you like the Oriental types, the Japanese types, or the Ichiban selections, which are elongated, skinny types, do wonderful when you do your barbecue this weekend. So we go from cool weather, January to early March, warm weather. Now we're in warm weather crops. It has to be hot. You have to keep the weeds down. You have to have ample air and sunlight, ample nutrition. Your warm weather crops include, they go by several names: black eyed peas, southern peas, cow peas, etc. So this is a Texas pink eye, beautiful shells, and then when you shell them, there's a lot of ways to use the southern peas. But this is a good time if you're letting your garden stay fallow, particularly through the months of July or August. You can also use this as a green manure crop, or what some people call a cash crop, to cover the soil, build the soil with organic material, possibly a little bit of nitrogen into the soil. Not that much, you still need to fertilize, and then a crop of pods. if you've ever grown black-eyed peas, southern peas, try to harvest some of the young green bean types before they size up and color up like the Texas pecan that we see here. They taste as good as any green bean. So you might try a few extra plants and see how you like those as well. That's the southern tradition. We should be growing black-eyed peas. We should be growing okra, and then we should be growing sweet potatoes. So okra. Oh, okra is a must if you live in the South. We like our pickled okra, or fried okra, and everything else that you can use up with okra. There's a lot of different selections out there in okra, but this is a must of the musts. When you grow them during the hot summertime, only grow the plants you can manage and do a good job in maintaining them, as well as harvesting them, because it can be, it's like the fish story. You know, that fish grows from one story to the next, but with okra, you look at those young developing pods in the morning, they're very young and tender. You know, you should be able to bend the nose of the okra. You should be able to put your pocket knife through the pod, because if not, they get too woody and your production is going to decline as well. When you go out to the agriculture fields, keep an eye on the cotton fields. Look at the flowers of cotton. Okra, hibiscus, and cotton are in the Malvaceae family. Beautiful flowers in the cotton family, all related. Another thing, when you grow okra, and hopefully Molly will talk about that, you might get fire ants that kind of are the ranchers of aphids. So you might have to put some baits out there to minimize the fire ants, because they tend to come when you grow okra out there. But it's a southern tradition, lots of fun. This is a variety that we collected seeds on. Some of the nurseries might have some seeds. So if you can see these pods, they're way overgrown. An okra pod should be about 3 inches in length, but we're sizing up these pods. We're going to dry them on the plant and collect the seed. And you can do that too at Oscar Okra. Hopefully the nurseries have some seed out there. You collect this pod at the end, and then you can start direct seeding April, May of next year, and continue this process. If you're doing open pollinated varieties such as this Oscar okra, you got to keep it pure and not grow any other varieties as not to cross pollinate them. But this is a winner. It's a semi-dwarf selection. It's a much more manageable but very productive. It's a ladyfinger type. It's a complete smooth potted selection, which does very well, and a very tasty and excellent for cooking, for frying up, pickling, etc. Oscar okra. Sweet potatoes, yeah, you can grow sweet potatoes, but I think sweet potatoes probably do best in a large container. So you can grow your own slips in March and direct uh, put these slips out of the root system as you see the sweet potato, and start them in March and protect them during the cool weather. But sweet potatoes are a long growing root crop. You grow them and start them around March, and you harvest them or tip over your container in early October. Then you can make sweet potato pie, fries, and all those great things that sweet potatoes will come. You don't need too many plants. You probably put up to 5 little slips or transplants. Sometimes the nurseries sell them in March and April as well. And remember, starch needs to convert to sugar. So when you harvest, pop them out of the container in October. Any ones that are damaged, you want to use those immediately. But after you clean them off and dry them from any excess of moisture for a minimum of 30 days, then you can have the best sweet potato pie for Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner. Thai and some of the Asian folks grow extra plants. Particularly, it grows as a big vine. Grows as a big vine. So the very young tendrils, the young shoots, the leaves, you can use those for stir fry, and they're very nutritious as like a spinach, collard greens, or beet greens. They're very delicious, and that's another extra additive to growing sweet potatoes. Remember, it's a long-term crop. So part of your spring and fall planting is, when is something planted and when is it ready. So this is a very long-term crop. But if you've never grown sweet potatoes, I think it's a very fun crop to play with next year. A lot of people have been having excitement with that. Castroville, California grows 97% of all the commercial globe artichokes in the U.S., as many of the Sicilian families used to do in the New York area and the farms in California. Very Italian, very ethnic type of crops from the 1920s to the 1950s that we didn't know what artichokes, globe artichokes, or broccoli was. But these are big plants. So we plant small little plants in the month of October, and then we start harvesting these chokes, the big thistle-like plants, from now to May. And it's a big plant, so you have to allocate enough space. A 4x4 space is usually what is needed. They go into a pseudo dormancy during June and July. They start dying down. The first reaction people do is start watering, which is no, because they go into a summer quiescence or a dormancy. So you water them once a month during June, July, and August, and move a significant rain event. And late August, early September, you dig the root clump, you cut away the dead portion, and you see the new growth, and then you replant it, ideally in a new section that can allocate a full sun location, great, excellent soil drainage, and a 4x4. Even if you don't harvest the small chokes, which you can use similar to a Brussels sprout if they're very small baby chokes, or a big one and enjoy that, let a few flower because they have a unique purple lavender-like flower that makes excellent to bring inside as a floral arrangement. Strawberries, hey, what happened this week? Strawberry Festival Petite, the biggest area in the state growing strawberries, unfortunately was canceled. But HEB with their strawberry creamy creations ice cream, hopefully everybody will have some this summer. But we're finishing strawberries. Strawberries we grow as an annual, an 8th-month crop. So back in September or no later than November-ish of last year, we plant the strawberry plants. We pinch all the runners and the flowers to the end of December, and then we start harvesting March to the end of May. So as an 8th-month annual, we jerk the plants out in May because they're dirty plants. They bring in a lot of disease and insect and spider mites towards the end. California and Florida, which tends to flood the market, grows these strawberries 14 months out of the year. So strawberries are often on the list of 10 most sprayed plants. Our growers down in Petite, they're not certified organic, but the practices that they use, and you as a home gardener as well, very, very, very few sprays of insecticides or fungicides. And another thing we want you to look at this picture, look how brilliant red, maroon, peak of performance these strawberries are, all the way to the cap. Strawberry is considered a non-climacteric fruit as an avocado. Not like an avocado or banana, which you buy them, they'll ripen up more. This is done. You buy these at the grocery store with 90% red with the white caps, they're not going to get any taste or they're not going to maturate or mature anymore. So us as home gardeners, growing a few plants and doing a good job on these few plants, we can have the best strawberries out there. So if you didn't grow any strawberries, then try some next fall and harvest them and do what our growers down in Poteet do. And you can do that in your backyard or in a strawberry container, a large container on the patio, or even a hanging basket. Look for all the varieties, any variety that you buy at an independent nursery from September to November of the same varieties they're planting down in Poteet. So they should do well for you. Irish potatoes. Remember, a sweet potato is a root. The Irish potatoes is a tuber, folks. This is where French fries come from. So this is a much, much shorter crop than the sweet potatoes, and they're in the Solanaceae family, the same family as tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant. So we put the cut, prepped, cured tubers in the ground about mid-February. So here in the next couple of weeks or so, these plants are going to start turning brown and yellow, wilting down some. Again, our first reaction is what? Start watering them more. No, don't do that. You're going to rot those tubers. That indicates, if all things being equal and you're growing these correctly, that it's time to go ahead and grab the plant by the base, jerk it out of the ground. Most of those small little tubers will come out. You'll do minimum excavating and digging into the soil. Another fun crop to grow with kids in large containers are in the ground. But put this on your calendar. Buy them at late January, early February. This one that we see in front of us is called Yukon Gold. White Kennebec, Red Lesotho, Red Pontic are also proven winners. You can buy seed or certified seed potato tubers at your independent nursery or feed stores during late January or February. But this is a fun crop. And kids, besides just eating French fries, should know where those French fries come from. And this is a fun thing to do with the kids. We're not going to grow these huge Idaho russet potatoes, but we can grow real nice new potatoes, and they're so delicious. And make mashed potatoes and all that good stuff with them. Look at this young lady. This is what we want. We want those big smiles. We want the children to have the experience. She's pulling out red Pontiac potatoes. Again, you don't have to grow that many plants, but this experience this young lady had by just growing it and harvesting and hopefully going home with her family and preparing this for that night's meal. This is what we need to teach our kids, particularly the urban kids, because we are losing that, or a better respect of where our food comes from. Landscape diversity is very good when you grow in spring and the fall. Again, we can grow vegetables 12 months out of the year, but we have to have blooming plants 12 months out of the year to bring in beneficial insects, to have blooming plants, to have cut flowers, etc. So Molly Keck, our entomologist, will talk a lot about the insect, the bad ones, unfortunately, that tend to come when we don't follow the horticulture principles of growing the vegetables correctly. This is a must. A great mentor of mine, Dr. Sam Codner. If you do not have this book in your home library, I think it's a must. Great reading. It has all the family and classification of all these vegetables. I love history. It gives you the old world, new world, where these vegetables originate from then to where we're at today, and all the step-by-step success for a home gardener. A great book to give as a gift as well. A great man, and is the best vegetable book on the market. Texas Gardening Magazine. You might go to their website, order their magazine if you're not currently getting it, and then you can purchase this book on there. And I think it's a must for every home vegetable garden. Always like to throw a bonus plant out there every presentation that we do here. This is going to be the third of the 2020 Texas Superstar selections, Pentas or Pintas plants. This selection is called Lucky Star. And as you can see in this image, you can see a vast array of different colors that it comes in. Beautiful plant on the patio as a standalone plant, or grow with combination plants, purslane, petunia, or other, or a standalone plant as a border plant. This selection is only going to grow about a foot tall. They really prefer going into the summertime, filtered light or early morning sun, ideally. But if you plant them much earlier, they will adapt to the full sun location. But this time of the year, early morning sun and then ample shade past 2 o'clock, like many of your plants on the patio, would do much happier. Look for this at your local independent nursery. I think you'll like this as our third Texas Superstar selection for 2020. But what else do you get? Butterflies. If you want to attract a lot of unique butterflies and an array of different types of butterflies in and around your landscape for the beauty, as we're enjoying the birds right now, we can also enjoy butterflies. Pentas, particularly this Lucky Star 2020 Texas Superstar selection, is a must for everybody's home landscape and patio. We've talked a lot about today. I gave you a spoonful of information of vegetable garden this spring. Things that are growing, things that you might consider planting next spring, and things that you can get the kids involved as well as the family, such as small fruited tomatoes, maybe a second wave of bush beans, squash, zucchini, getting some southern peas planted, getting some okra. All those you can do at this time, either in large containers or in your vegetable garden. Get the kids out there and enjoy. Aggie Horticulture is the biggest website in the Texas A&M University system. If you're not familiar with Aggie Horticulture, you have without a doubt the best vegetable site. Dr. Cotner's book is a plus and a must, but utilize the Aggie Horticulture site, specifics to all these vegetables and many more that we talked about to give you more gardening guidelines and ideas to help you be even more successful. Please keep an eye on our Barrett County Extension website, the next link there, for ongoing events that we offer, as well as archived material that we have, and our Facebook page. Like us as well. Dr. Jerry Parsons is a must website. He has plantanswers.com. A lot of great local information has been archived on that website. So if you're not utilizing these three sources, please add them, please utilize them. A lot of great information for your success for now as well as into the future. Don't forget, this Wednesday, April 22nd, is Earth Day. So maybe we all need to be better stewards of the land, of what we're currently doing. Besides planting a shade tree, maybe it's time planting a tomato or pepper plant, or maybe some pentas, other great things for butterflies, for hummingbirds, for us to consume fruits and vegetables. So we all have to be better stewards of the environment, not only April 22nd for Earth Day, but every day that we have in front of us. Don't forget Molly Keck's a second part of this vegetable series of what's happening in the garden, insects in the vegetable garden. Something is eating my tomato. Yes, we might be doing the best of the best of growing these plants, but sometimes these creatures and little critters get in there. So she's going to kind of help you and give you some ideas of what those insects are, possibly how to minimize them, how to properly control them, and give you different options on how to reduce their population, so we can win the race and come out with quantity as well as quality vegetables towards the end of the season. So that's my email address. Hopefully everyone had a good time today. And if you have any gardening related questions, again, utilize us. That's what the extension service is. 104 plus years in our great state of Texas, with the oldest institute of higher public education, Texas A&M University. We're here to grow businesses, to grow families such as 4-H, and to help you as a backyard gardener to be much more successful, and helping all of us being better stewards of the environment. So don't hesitate to send me an email at dhrodriguez@ag.tamu.edu and send me good images, quality images if you need help identifying something, but please send it as a good quality attachment and not a part of the email. And as always, learn and have fun, and happy gardening this spring and into the future.